as we are talking about inflation, we have touched on food and beverages. Quite a good example that you made there, Mr. Daniel Stamnan, because it seems that people don't seem to really understand, when you try to explain to them like how, what internationally is being, how decisions that are made internationally, how it affects us locally in Namibia. So we've touched on the food and beverages, how we as Namibia do import most of our products and how that affects us on a daily basis as a consumer. But also looking at housing and rentals.
Elsie, for the past 5 years, it started with COVID, but the housing market has never really come back to pre-COVID levels. And you see it in the bank statistics, and you see it in the statistics agency, in their statistics. If you look at the volume of houses that are traded, it's the first indication that the housing market is very stuck. But now you find there's a weird phenomenon. If houses don't sell, but they don't go away, what happens to them? And that is they enter the rental market. You see something similar with cars. If you see a slump in new car sales, I can guarantee you, just go check the used car sales and you will see they are growing.
Yeah.
There's this dynamic between, and this is what we call high value tickets, high value items. Stuff that is typically 100, 200, 300,000 or $1 million or more. And that same principle applies to housing. If homeowners feel that they cannot get a fair price for their property if they want to sell it, or building owners, it can be commercial or it can be residential, it doesn't really matter. The economic principle is the same. If they don't get a fair price for their property, but they can afford to pay the monthly installments, the mortgages on those properties, then they don't sell. But those properties come into the rental market. Now, typically, you would expect the property, if the rental market is flooded with properties that owners cannot sell or they are finding it difficult to sell, you would expect the prices to come down, but they don't.
Yes.
They increase. And why? Because of a fairly complicated financing mechanism. The people, the owners, the current owners, they are committed with the financing institutions for a certain amount. They can afford a part of that mortgage, but very few people, very few individuals or families can afford the whole mortgage. So that they make up through the rent. And whereas the interest rate went up over the last 2 years until about 3-4 months ago, the monthly mortgages went up. So to make up for that shortfall, the property owners simply increase the rent. You see the mechanism. They can pay a part to the bank, and the mortgage gets higher and higher, goes higher and higher every month. Why? Because interest rates went from 3.5% to 7.75, I think. A crazy increase in a very short time, which had a major impact on what home property owners are liable for at the bank, which they made up by increasing the rent, which they were dependent on in the first place because they couldn't get their property sold. And the rising interest rates had a big part in this. Fortunately, the Bank of Namibia have now finally, after you and I said about 10 times, we suspect they don't really know what they're doing. We've now gone into a descending or decreasing interest rate cycle, But I'm not I'm not convinced that it's going to last.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm also
And
not convinced.
anybody that tells you, anybody that makes a sort of dogmatic forecast and tells you this is gospel, they're sucking it out of their thumb, because you don't know. There are too many variables that have a bearing on the cost of housing. The interest rate is one, and the interest rate we don't control, as I've explained in previous talk. It's determined by what happens in America, and as you can see every week, nobody knows what's happening in America, because one day this happens and the next day just the opposite.
Not even the Americans know.
They are the last in the, So it's a very volatile situation in terms of financing, in terms of investment, because remember, buying a house, buying a property is a form of investment.
Yes.
And that will not go away until the American internal or domestic economy has settled.
Yeah. On that note, we unfortunately have to say goodbye as time is not on our side, but of course we will meet again next week, same time, same place, and inflation will always be a topic that we can come back to. But for now, goodbye.